Hello and welcome to Triage, timely conversations for healthcare professionals, a podcast created and produced by K&L Gates. Each episode is designed to highlight important developments in health law and analyze the impact on our clients and friends of the firm. We hope you enjoy this podcast.
Welcome to Triage. My name is Rebecca Schaefer. I'm a partner in the Healthcare and FDA practice group here at K&L Gates. And joining me today is my colleague, Mike Hinkle. You want to say a word of introduction?
Hello. Hi, this is Mike Hinkle. I'm in the RTP office with Rebecca, and happy to be here with you today.
Mike and I partner frequently on clinical trials and clinical research-related matters in support of academic medical centers, research institutions, also sponsors. And so with that intersection, we thought we'd highlight today a recent FDA draft guidance that was issued in May, Decentralized Clinical Trials for Drugs, Biological Products, and Devices. It's a guidance for industry, investigators, and other stakeholders. So Mike, do you want to say a little bit more about what this guidance is, why it's coming out, and why we chose to highlight it?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, this is a guidance or draft guidance right now that Congress actually required FDA to issue as part of the Food and Drug Omnibus Reform Act, or FDORA, as people are calling it. So that statutory act required FDA to issue or revise a draft guidance to clarify and advance the decentralized clinical trials. The sort of goal for that, or purpose of why Congress would be interested in that and why FDA should be interested in it and why they are really is I think anybody who's been around clinical trials realizes that it's really quite a burden for a trial subject to participate in a trial, usually because the clinical trial site is almost always at a traditional research facility of some form or another. And oftentimes that requires subjects to travel many miles to participate, to show up for different meetings and so forth. They have to come in to have their vitals checked or to be administered the investigational product. And it's quite a burden on study subjects. And as a result, we see a lack of diversity many times in clinical trial participation among racial groups or among socioeconomic groups. And there's now a recognition of that. There's really across the board at FDA to try to increase diversity in clinical trials. And so this is one possible way of doing that, to move the collection of data and participation in trials outside of just the traditional sites into maybe other local laboratories or local healthcare provider sites where participants can have data collected or provide data outside of the sort of normal traditional collection points in a clinical trial setting. So what the guidance or draft guidance, and I will say it is draft, so you have you're actually able to comment on a draft guidance. The deadline for submitting comments is August 1st. And so if you have a chance to review the guidance, the draft guidance, and have concerns about it, you are able to submit comments, and of course we're happy to assist with submitting those comments if someone would like to do so. But the draft guidance points out some of the regulatory issues and hurdles and challenges that investigators who conduct clinical trials, as well as sponsors who sponsor clinical trials. So a sponsor is usually the device company, drug company whose product is being tested. The investigator is usually a position at a research facility or institution who's actually conducting the study and collecting the data. So this guidance really helps both. And what it does is it outlines some of the challenges and hurdles from a regulatory and also from a scientific and statistical consideration. So I know, Rebecca, some of the things that you and I have been talking about previously, so some of the regulatory points that are outlined in the draft guidance, you and I were talking about. As I recall, there were some issues around medical boards and that sort of thing that we were discussing.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. So happy to highlight just a couple of the regulatory points from the guidance that are call-outs, or at least we would consider noteworthy. And I'd just add to your overview, the guidance also expressly contemplates collection of clinical trial data in study subjects' homes. I mean, the decentralized
Right. Yep.
is considered broadly, and again, really to the aims of promoting engagement and therefore diversity in clinical trial participation. So I think, as you consider conducting clinical trial activities, including in, a study subject's home or in their local healthcare provider's office, it's worth noting, and FDA calls out, that the regulatory requirements for oversight of clinical trials are the same as in a traditional setting versus a decentralized setting. There's no different or lesser regulatory standard. And the med board point I was highlighting is it just that position by FDA in the draft guidance is reminiscent to me of as medical boards in the past 10 years or so were issuing guidance on telehealth standards. They typically said the same standard of care applies, and it's up to you, trained licensed professional to determine on a risk, based assessment what's appropriate to do in what medium through telehealth or through traditional settings. So in that way, it felt similar. But yeah, under the FDA rules, investigators remain responsible for the conduct of the study, including through services they would contract with for support of the protocol from local healthcare providers, labs, others that are going to be part of the clinical trial activities that contribute data to the study. Just a couple of other call outs is that FDA recommends a central IRB to serve as the IRB of record for decentralized clinical trials. And that is, an important component to bring standardization to obtaining informed consent, including from remote locations. The guidance contemplates obtaining electronic informed consent or through remote means. And there I'll just also put a pin in. We're still staying tuned for FDA's issuance of final rules following the notice of proposed rulemaking they had at the end of last year with respect to harmonizing FDA's IRB requirements with the common rule. But those were some of the regulatory callouts just I wanted to mention at a high level. And then I wanted to go back to you, Mike, and ask about the reference in this draft guidance to another FDA guidance regarding digital health technologies for remote data acquisition in clinical trials, and how these two guidance dovetail, and anything you'd highlight about the digital health technologies guidance.
Yeah, I think FDA recognizes in the draft guidance that in order to decentralize and collect data outside of the traditional setting, whether it's in a person's home or another healthcare professional's office or wherever it may be, that sponsors and investigators are going to have to use new technologies, digital health technologies many times, to either collect data or to store data. So they reference another guidance that they've come out about using digital health technologies in clinical investigations. And that guidance is quite lengthy and has a lot of great information about how to appropriately select a digital health technology that's fit for the purpose of what the study intends to collect, how to validate these new technologies that, for example, that may require a usability study before doing your clinical investigation to ensure that study subjects, participants are able to properly use the digital health technology in a way that will result in valid data. And then there's the issue around statistical analysis of when you use a digital health technology. You have to anticipate that you're going to have missing data points and erroneous data points. It may not happen in other settings using other technologies. And so you need to account for all of that and come in early with FDA with a plan about how you want to use digital health technologies. That's really kind of the takeaway of many of these guidance documents, is start that discussion with FDA early about how you're going to select a proper digital health technology, how you're going to validate that for use in your particular study, and how you're going to analyze the data that comes from that. So the digital health technology statistical analysis issues also carry over going back to our draft guidance on decentralized trials. When you collect data from other sources, that's from multiple sources, you need to anticipate how that's going to impact the quality of the data. You're going to have potentially more variability, potentially less precision, and the data that you collect from all these different sites. And that is something that FDA wants you to come in and discuss with them early, come in with a data management plan, for example. And this is particularly true if you're doing a non-inferiority study where you need to use historical data to establish a baseline to set a margin for non-inferiority. if the historical data were all done using a traditional model with non-digital health technology, that may require issues or may require a discussion with FDA whether that's appropriate for a decentralized trial using digital technology. The guidance also, Rebecca, I think, provided some very helpful information on determining when you decentralize and include other people collecting data in your study, how do those people need to be identified to FDA? It was a good section on that I wanted to get you to touch on.
Yeah, appreciate that, Mike. Thank you. So, and this is, a heads up to the investigators primarily and the research sites that are going to be engaging in decentralized clinical trials. I mean, it's relevant for sponsors as well, but with, a more decentralized cast of characters, so to speak, in supporting the protocol and trial-related activities, there's going to be a need to decide and determine if a provider or other person involved in those trial activities needs to be listed on the FDA Form 1572, which is, really identifying them as an investigator or sub-investigator involved in the research, or if they really aren't rising to the level of, participating in the research, but nonetheless supporting study-related activities, they would, not go on the 1572, but still need to be identified on a task log. That's maintained, again, under the investigator's oversight. And the guidance had some helpful cues for that dividing line or how to make that determination. And it's when trial personnel contribute directly and significantly to the trial data, they certainly need to be on the Form FDA 1572 as sub-investigators. Conversely, local healthcare providers that are contracted to provide trial-related services that are really resembling what they would do in their routine clinical practice. So, for example, physical examinations, x-rays, vital signs, and where detailed knowledge of the protocol and the investigator's brochure isn't necessary, then they don't need to be listed on the 1572, but they would still need to be identified on the task log. So it's just another consideration or challenge to be navigated in decentralized clinical trials. And with that, Mike, I wanted, to ask you about some of the logistical considerations that also have regulatory implications that come up with remote monitoring and other aspects of contemplating trial activities happening at remote locations.
Yeah, as you decentralize and move out, you have to think about things like how you're going to monitor the study, how you're going to collect adverse event information. Is that going to be as accurate and as thorough as it would have been in a traditional setting? So you have to think about those things. There's the issue of if you have to deliver the investigational product out to all the different sites, and does that require any type of particular storage conditions in order to maintain the quality of the products? Are you going to have to validate that with additional studies, for example, possibly? And then, of course, as we said, when you're using digital health, that means more electronic storage of records and potentially signatures. So that presents all sorts of issues that need to be addressed from the perspective of what FDA's regulation Part 11 around electronic signatures and records go. So those are all additional things that need to be considered and are mentioned in the draft guidance as you think about decentralizing a clinical trial. And then, Becca, to sort of wrap up, there's this issue of how this guidance and how the concept of decentralizing clinical trials, how that may tie into the licensure issues around telehealth that have become such an issue during the COVID pandemic. Is that right?
Yeah, certainly. And it's just, a reminder, not that institutions or providers are likely to forget that where you might be having these encounters across state lines and you're, having a visit with your study subject in a remote location that may be across state lines, just not to forget considering what, telehealth flexibilities from a licensure, state medical board licensure perspective are or are not in place to support those cross-state encounters. But yeah, with that, I think we'll, wrap up our summary and highlight of this draft guidance. We found it fascinating. It's really just promoting that decentralized clinical trials, again, utilizing non-traditional settings, for example, patients' homes or their local healthcare provider's office, can be a way to promote efficiency, certainly, and more importantly, improve participant engagement, recruitment, enrollment, and retention of a meaningfully diverse clinical study population. And as we noted, All the rules applicable to FDA-regulated studies conducted in a traditional setting continue to apply, and decentralized clinical trials therefore require careful planning and risk assessment and study design, all to ensure adequate study subject safety, data integrity, and proper oversight of the network of local healthcare providers or other stakeholders on which decentralized clinical trial models rely. Thank you for tuning in, and Mike, thanks for joining me today. It was great to talk with you.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
Thanks again for listening to Triage, timely conversations for healthcare professionals. New episodes are available for download through Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. By subscribing to Triage, you will receive timely notifications for each new episode. Also, if you have any topics you would like to hear discussed on Triage, please don't hesitate to email triagesupport@klgates.com. We would love to hear from you.